I feel like I got something stuck in my throat.
There's a frog in my throat.
Oh, welcome back, everybody. It's Wednesday.
We back.
Yeah, we back, and it's been a long time coming, hasn't it?
Yeah, this whole little hiatus from fights has gotten just strange vibes, you know? Only one recording a week, no fights to break down. It's all right. We got to do what we got to do.
We are down bad over here at the Below Average Shows MMA podcast. That's a good way to put it, right?
I didn't know what to do with my hands on Saturday night when there were no fights on my television.
I just kept looking for them, and they weren't there. I just kept saying, "No, there'll be something, right?" But nope,
Not a
nothing was
thing.
there. Yeah, guys, it's been a struggle having these. We were joking about the 27 days before another fight. We've gotten down to what now? Is it 20? It's 27. What are we at now?
I think we're just under 3 weeks. Yeah, just under. So yeah, something like that. 20, 19, something like that.
Okay, so yeah, I think we're at 19. Looks like so 19 days till the next fight. But yeah, it's we joked about it a lot, and yet it's honestly kind of brutal.
It hurts.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, there's a lot of exciting things going on when we get back. 3 cards in 1 week. That's going to be insanity. That whole week of content's just going to be.
That is just such a perfect way to welcome us back into the week, like of fights.
Right.
Welcome into 2021. So this little hiatus we're on right now, just doing one a week, is good. A nice little recharge, and then we're just right into the wolves starting that middle of January.
Yeah, you're not kidding. But obviously, another factor here is that we're in the holidays, in the middle of them right now. So, Dominic, how was your Christmas and any plans coming up for New Year's?
Yeah, everything went well, you know. Got to see the family, and I just had some good food. Probably too much food, if I'm being honest. Got a couple UFC shirts, you know, that's always fun. We show up to fight night looking ready to roll. It was just nice, you know, seeing the family. Nothing new or nothing coming up, I don't think, anyways, right now for New Year's Eve, but you never really know. All I know is that come New Year's Day, the Buckeyes better be getting a title. For those of our listeners living in the great state of Ohio, let's go Buckeyes. Noah, what about you?
Well, I completely agree about the Buckeyes sentiment, and that is my plans for New Year's Day. Christmas went really well. It was very nice to catch up with family, much of the sentiments you said. I can also say because we are both about 2.5 hours away from home. So it was really nice to catch up with everybody. I got to see my mom, my dad, and obviously extended family after that. But I'm definitely at the point I go back to Bowling Green on Wednesday. So when you guys are listening to this, I'll be heading back. And I think I'm a little ready to just kind of go back to my own place and
Get
have
back
my
on
own
like a
space.
routine. I'm a big like routine guy, you know.
I am. I'm still off work though until
Oh yeah, true.
the next Monday, so I'll still be chilling. But I just kind of want my own space. Like I like having my own space
I
and
feel it.
privacy and stuff. But they've been, I've been staying with my mom. She's always very hospitable. So, yeah, very, very happy to be back. But this is definitely, I've been waiting for this episode
This
here
is your baby here. This is your coined phrase here for a new series.
As you guys, if you've been following us at all the last few weeks, are aware, we're ending our episode catalog for 2020 with a new series called This or That. Now, how might that work? Maybe you would ask. Well, I'm going to tell you. Me and Dom are going to go back and forth here. So we'll start with me. I'll give 2 different fights that are realistic for 2021. And Dom has to choose which one. He can only pick one fight to happen. So whichever fight excites him most, whichever fight, for whatever reason, he can only pick one. And the other one will never happen.
Whichever one tickles our fancy.
Yes, as the people like to say. And then after that, me and him will just kind of talk about both fights and, the fighters involved and whatnot. And it's really an excuse for us to talk about some of these rumored matchups for 2021 or maybe even confirmed matchups without it feeling too similar to maybe topics we've already done on this podcast. So this could definitely turn into a full-blown series. I think it's a great idea for one. I really like the concept, but it's mostly just a reason for us to talk about 2021.
Right.
So you ready to just kind of get into this?
I think we hop right in. Let's do this thing.
So do you want me to go first or you go first?
Being that this is your idea for a series, I think I open the floor to you, my friend. Hit me hard out of the gate right here.
Okay, so we both said before we started recording that we each have one pair of women's fights. So I think we're starting there, correct?
Yeah, start there and then just go from lightest weight class to heaviest.
Okay. So, Dominic, do you take Weili Zhang versus Rose Namajunas or Valentina Shevchenko versus Jessica Andrade?
Oh. Well, obvious answer no. I hope we just get both of them. Oh, but if you're throwing me on the spot right out of the gate like this, I got to go Weili versus Rose, man. I just think it's more so because Weili, while still being labeled as dominant in the way that she's looked since her, run in the UFC, still relatively new, only one title defense, and Rose would be her second toughest battle to this point outside of Joanna, which I don't think you're going to get much tougher of a battle than that fight was. But, of course, that was our fight of the year for 2020. But I'm waiting on Weili Rose to be everything but confirmed. I think that's a fight that needs to happen. It makes the most sense. I love Valentina versus Andrade. I definitely think that fight might be the one we see first with all this stuff going around about Rose and if she's going to do the title fight or not. But we've just seen Valentina look so dominant. She's defended the title 4 times now. I, by all means, think Jessica will be her hardest competition outside of course, Amanda Nunes. However, with so much more, or just a longer title reign, so much more to see from Valentina, it gets me a little more excited to see Weili go for her second defense against a great striker in Rose. I'm going to have to go with the straw weights on that one.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. We both had, I guess, mixed opinions on Andrade's move to flyweight.
Mm-hmm.
She was matched up immediately with Chookagian, who we thought was going to be a tough matchup for her because of Chookagian's length. And, she does have a very technical striking style. And I didn't really have much faith in Andrade to be able to close the distance, close that gap, and be able to land much meaningful offense. And I'm pretty sure you felt pretty similar on that.
Right.
Well, she blew those expectations out of the water. Finished Chookagian with a knee to the body. Just
looked so good, so strong. Like she had been in that weight class her whole career.
Yeah, and obviously she should be next for Valentina. I think she's Valentina's toughest matchup to date, besides maybe Joanna. But Joanna was fighting kind of out of her weight class. It kind of remains to be seen with Andrade, because Andrade just said that this is her ideal weight class. She's fought at bantamweight early on in her career. She was obviously, for being as small as she is, or as short as she is, I should say, she was definitely fighting out of her weight class there. She had a lot of success at strawweight. She was the strawweight champion before losing it to Weili, actually. But it kind of fizzled out once she lost to Weili, and then she lost to Rose in a rematch on Fight Island this summer. So she's moving up here, and I do think it's potentially Valentina's toughest matchup to date. And Valentina, for her dominance, I guess if you want to pick holes in her run, her latest title defense that just happened against Jennifer Maia was maybe not the most impressive of her performances.
Right.
She was dominant, but she did lose a round, was pretty much controlled for an entire round, and you've never seen that. Now, outside of that, was she completely dominant? Yes, she was. But I guess if you want to say that maybe is Valentina lost a step, I don't know. I'm definitely grasping for straws there, but I still love the matchup. I just think Whaley Rose,
It's
I
so
don't
good,
know.
man, in all aspects of the fight game.
I think it just does so much for both of them. With as much as I love Valentina, and Andrade is one of my favorite fighters in the whole UFC, Whaley just is coming off of the 2020 Fight of the Year. We haven't seen her since. She has looked fantastic, and I wouldn't even go as far to say dominant, because now, did she dominate Andrade in the title win? Yes. But she arguably lost to Joanna. You know who's beat Joanna twice? Rose Namajunas.
This is very true.
And MMA math does not work that way. You can't do that. But I think that this leads itself to be like, okay, how for real is Weili Zhang as a champion? And for Rose, does she still have that title aspiration? She says she does, but there's always those question marks about where her head's at, the mental side of the game. Is she able to really mentally be a champion?
Right.
That's kind of been the question marks with her, and Dana's kind of even doubled down on that lately. So we'll see if this matchup really happens. But I liked pairing these two because to me it's the obvious next up, for these two weight classes. I know Amanda has a contender with Megan Anderson at featherweight, but like bantamweight doesn't have a clear-cut contender right now. And I thought these two fights were more exciting than Amanda Megan, so that's why I paired them up.
For sure. I mean, I love both those matchups. Again, hopefully we just see both of them. That would make life really, really good in 2021. But if I really did have to pick one of the two, definitely Weili Rose for me. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and now I'll give you the floor here, my friend.
So I also have women's strawweight here. I also have Weili versus Rose. However, my second option, and I already know what you're going to pick here, obviously, based on your answer to yours. But I did just want to throw another matchup out here that gets me really excited to think about, and that is the return of a healthy, or hopefully healthy, Tatiana Suarez getting thrown in with what would be her toughest test and someone that would catapult her right into the title. Because usually I would call for her to just get the title, but she's been laid out for so long with injury. She does need a fight. And I think what better way to let her end this upper echelon, that next level of fighter, than Tatiana Suarez versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk. So there's your two options. Of course, I know Weili Rose is what we love so much, but the thought of Tatiana Joanna is intriguing for a lot of ways. So I'm going to leave you on the floor there.
I wasn't expecting Joanna to be thrown in there. So let me just talk through this, right? Because I just talked a little bit, and you did as well, about Rose versus Weili and how that is the clear-cut title fight that needs to happen at that division. And it's probably the biggest fight you can make in that division. But Tatiana Suarez is very much untapped potential at this point. She's looked truly fantastic in her UFC performances. Unfortunately for her, she has had so many neck injuries, and when she is, primarily a grappler, a wrestler, neck injuries are very much a lingering problem rather than a blip on the radar, so to say. So, they took her at UFC. The last we heard about her is that the UFC took her out of the rankings due to inactivity, which was definitely sucked. But that if she's able to come back and healthy, they're not going to just give her to someone unranked. She'll probably be fighting someone ranked very high, I would say.
For sure.
When she's ready to come back. And a matchup with Joanna, man, because there's a lot of question marks there. For Tatiana, are we ever really going to see her reach her full potential? Is she is she capable of battling through those injuries and being that fighter that we've seen flashes of in her performances?
Yeah, I mean,
And
we're
for
talking
Joanna,
about, undefeated, literally titled as the female version of Habib. That's how good Tatiana is. And like you said, with these injuries, it's just like, will we ever get to see what she can really do, what she's fully
mhm.
made of? I mean, only time will tell with these injuries, but I'll let you continue. I cut you off there.
No, you're good. The other end of this being Joanna, her last fight was that fight of the year with Weili Zhang, where both women literally just beat the shit out of each other for 5 rounds. I mean, it's truly just, it's the women's version of Robbie Lawler, Rory McDonald, like the two women that were taken to the absolute brink of what they can handle pain wise and probably took years off their life. But the question for Joanna is, did it take years off of her career? Can she still be the queen of violence? Can she still have that, you know, that same kind of performance in her that she did with the Whaley fighter on her title run? Because I think, she's had some losses pile up on her here in her later run. A lot of question marks on if she's going to be fighting for much longer. Even where her head's at as far as the fight game, is she on her way out the door kind of thing? Because, she lost to Rose twice after being undefeated for a long time. Then she got a win back against Tisha Torres. Then she lost to Valentina, and that's how Valentina won the flyweight belt. Then I think because when she beat Michelle Watterson, and then she's lost to Weili in a very close decision. So, what else is there really for her to do?
Right.
So I think that matchup's very intriguing because there's a lot that could be answered. And that's always the best fights, is like when both fighters
Have a lot
have
to prove.
a lot to lose and a lot to
Yep.
gain.
Yep.
There's much more at stake. I am going to go with Rose Whaley, but I think that's a definite matchup. I want to see if Tatiana can get healthy and if Joanna decides she wants to keep fighting.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at it, it's your typical striker versus grappler. Can Tatiana get the fight to the ground? If not, can she handle how good Joanna is on the feet and vice versa? Can Joanna keep it standing? And if so, can she just continue to dominate like we know her to do? And if she gets taken down, can she get back up? We've seen Joanna get taken down. I mean, Valentina did it to her a lot. And Valentina's wrestling is not Tatiana Suarez's wrestling. So there's a lot of questions there from stylistically what could happen. And then, like you mentioned, for their careers, a lot of questions to be answered as well. So love that fight. Wanted to throw it out there, just something a little different. And of course, Whaley Rose, again, they kind of just stole the show to start the episode, but we can't wait for that fight.
No, 100%. And this next one I have here for you, there's a common fighter in these two matchups.
I think I know one of them.
Well, the guy who, even though he's considered retired at this point, he just refuses to just leave the spotlight,
Oh boy, never mind. I am wrong.
So we got Henry Cejudo
Oh,
in both of these. Now, Dom, you can only choose one. Would you rather see Henry Cejudo come back versus Davison Figueiredo, or versus Alexander Volkanovski? And I want to be clear that those would both be title fights in my pitch to you.
Cejudo Volkanovski times 10. I say this for a lot of reasons. Reason number one, he's the only featherweight that Henry could actually fight. That is actually his size, so that's the first reason. If it's any other person that holds the featherweight belt, this fight is not being made. But being that it's Volkanovski and just the build of both these guys is so similar, 100% love that fight. Secondly, Henry Cejudo would have the chance to become the first ever person to win 3 belts in the UFC, which is unheard of, would be absolutely incredible. I think it's a favorable matchup for both guys in complete opposite ways. I think everything about it is so intriguing. Henry, of course, being that Olympic gold medalist as well. I mean, this guy would just have gold teeth at this point. I mean, there's nothing else this guy can own that's not gold if he were to go up and get a third belt here. Volkanovski has a lot to prove, and that's a big money fight for him as well. We don't see many money fights with the, lighter weight classes, but this is definitely one of them. Everybody loves the King of Cringe. A lot of people want to see Volkanovski get beaten. So Henry Cejudo would almost be the good guy in this fight, as hard as that is to believe. But I think deep down, a lot of people really do appreciate Henry's greatness, including myself. I know Noah's a huge fan. I do like Volkanovski. He just has a sour taste in my mouth because of how big of a fan I am of Max Holloway. However, I can't take away his greatness. One loss in his entire career. He's won like 20 straight fights. And so that's definitely the one I pick. But for the flyweight fight, man, I think about this fight a lot. No, I'm going to be honest. What would happen, Before the Moreno fight that Figueiredo had, I would say Davison can do it. I think Davison shocks the world and does beat Cejudo. But after we saw him go to deep waters with Moreno and get battle tested, I believe him and Henry would be a lot closer of a fight, and I believe Henry would even be favored just because everything we've seen from Henry has been so great, outside of his UFC loss to Demetrius the first time. I truthfully don't know how either of these fights would turn out. I think it's a very interesting matchup both ways. They're both toss-ups. You pick it,
Right.
Shoot him out of the sky with the duck thing. I don't even know what that's called. But, you throw something up, you shoot it. Yeah, pick the fight that way. Love both of these. But I have said for a while that if Henry were to come back, I think him and Volk would make the most sense. Of course, if Volk were to somehow lose that title, then Henry does not belong at featherweight. But this is the time that he does, so I got to go with that one out of those two.
So I'm actually, in my head, I'm actually going the other way. And here's why, because it's a pretty long and complicated reason, but we'll see if it's really as complicated as I think I am after I talk about it. So, got Henry Cejudo coming back. Now, I'm a big Henry Cejudo fan. Triple C, he's fun, man. I get it. He's cringy, but that's the whole point. That's the whole thing. Ideally, being the first guy to win 3 belts, 3 different divisions, I mean, that's a feat that we may never see again. And for someone like him who's so accomplished in just not just combat sports, but again, Olympic gold medalist, he's probably, I mean, at this point, I still say he's the most accomplished combat sports athlete ever. But to have that would just make it unquestionable. And since it is a division that he had yet to pursue, and Volkanovski's frame leads you to believe this is really the only time that it could probably be done for Henry because of how short he is. But the reason I'm not going to pick it is because I refuse, Dominic. I refuse on this podcast to advocate for a title shot to be given to someone who has never fought in that weight class.
Yeah.
And that is my whole reason. Not that I don't get excited like when Cejudo went up to fight Marlon Moraes, when Conor went up to fight Eddie Alvarez. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a hater of those fights. Like I buy into them. I enjoy them. I pay my money to watch them. I'm not one of those, people that just wants to piss on everything and, glass half empty, whatever. Like, I hate when people kind of get that way. Like, I get it. Maybe it's not maybe they didn't earn it, but let's just see if they beat the champion, then, who's to say that they weren't deserving of it, right?
Right.
But I won't advocate for it because I do the art of competition, right? That's what I love most. And I love guys being able to earn their spot. Cejudo could rightfully come back and fight for the flyweight belt again. Because he's already been the king of that. He's already been at the top there. And he had fought there for so long. There's a lot of questions about it, if he could even get back down to that weight. But I think that's where the interest comes in for me in seeing him versus Davison.
Mm-hmm.
Henry took out Mighty Mouse in a very close decision, and then starched TJ Dillashaw, who was coming down to try to kill the whole division. And so it's like right when he kind of ascended to the top of the flyweights, he was the savior of the flyweights, whatever. He left the division. So I feel like there's still a lot that he could prove to people by going back down. And now he's going up against the new king of that division. I know Davison's got some unfinished business with Mr. Brandon Moreno. And that's definitely the fight that needs to happen next. And Moreno could very likely win that fight. But Davison versus, just that star power there. And then you got Henry, who's got his star power. You put those two personalities against each other, and I think it could be a lot of fun. And it would show me if Davison were to knock out Henry Cejudo, or even just win the fight, it would really, I think, show a lot of people how far the flyweights have come, because that would elevate the status of Moreno and even guys like Benavidez, because Benavidez beat Cejudo back in the day. So, I mean, it could do a lot for this division. And if Henry wins and would hopefully continue to defend, that elevates the division even more, because he would be the biggest name holding that belt at the time. And then you got guys like Davison, Moreno, Askarov, Benavidez, Royval, who are vying for a title shot, and it just elevates the division even more. Cejudo beating Volkanovski would be I still would be very excited for that fight, because I just don't know how it would go. But if he won that, I don't think he would defend, because I don't think anybody else in that division he'd be able to have much of a chance against, which is weird to say about someone who's the champion. I don't want to sound like I'm talking down on Volkanovski. It's simply an X's and O's thing here. Volkanovski's stature just leads to a more reasonable matchup with Cejudo than Max Holloway or Zabit or Yair Rodriguez.
Right.
Or Brian Ortega, whoever.
Yeah, I mean, there's literally not another featherweight.
Yeah, it's just, and I just don't see Cejudo defending the featherweight belt if he were to go up and win it.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely couldn't agree with that more.
Yeah. But I think there's merit to both of those. That's the only reason why I went the other way, but I definitely think your reasoning is very sound. It's probably, if you just pit the matchups against each other, it's probably the better matchup, the more interesting matchup is Henry and Volk. But I was taking in a lot of other factors.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I typically agree. I'm not big on the whole just go pick a weight class and you get a title fight thing. And for whatever reason, Triple C's just got a hold on me here for this one. But yeah, both those fights are great. I love how you brought back Triple C, 2 different options, 2 different weight classes. Very enticing, Noah. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, and I left out bantamweight, which wasn't intentional, but
I respect it. I'll fill your gap right here, as a matter of fact, Noah.
All right, let's hear it.
Well, I'm just gonna let you hear it because we've talked about this. We've got Cody Garbrandt, Jose Aldo, right? You're probably thinking, well, nothing's gonna take the cake here. That's my fight, and you're probably right. I love that fight. I know you love that fight.
I know what you're gonna say here. I fucking know what you're gonna say here.
I don't know. Do you though?
I think I do.
Mr. TJ Dillashaw making his long-awaited return to the bantamweight division. And he's going to jump right in, Noah, and challenge the winner of Petr Yan and Aljamain Sterling for the title that he technically never lost. Mm-hmm. You tell me, brother. I guess that's sort of unfair, actually, but I'm going to still keep it that way. Because technically it's 2 different matchups for TJ. Either way, I'm going to let you sit on it for a second.
I don't feel like it changes my answer either way. And
I definitely knew this was like 100% the one you would pick.
I honestly don't know for sure if it is.
Oh, what?
Let me think about this, okay? So, for those of you who don't know, the matchup that I've been wanting to see the most at Bantamweight for a while now has been Cody Garbrandt versus Jose Aldo. I think that fight makes all the sense in the world. I love that Cody is finally seeing that. He's done fucking talking shit to Sean O'Malley for now. Like, you don't need to fight Sean O'Malley. You don't need to talk shit to Sean O'Malley. Go for Aldo. That makes perfect sense. That's a great freaking fight. Two guys that have really just, I mean, they're stars. You know, Jose's a legend. Cody's kind of on his way there, even with his struggles that he's had in the past couple of years. A masterful performance, a legend-making performance against Dominic Cruz. I'll put that. But yet, TJ Dillashaw to come back from PEDs, who left as the king of bantamweight. I mean, he was, you can say Dominic Cruz is the best bantamweight of all time. I'm not so sure about that. And I know he beat TJ, but man, TJ Dillashaw's career was before the PEDs, like, very interesting career. I mean, look at how he won the belt. He was put in as a late replacement against Renan Barão. Overwhelming odds against him to win that fight, and he dominated Renan Barão. Straight up dominated him, and then dominated him a second time.
Huge underdog that first time, too. No one thought TJ was going to win that fight.
No, he was filling in, I'm pretty sure, for Cruz. I'm pretty sure that's when Cruz got really banged up during that time when he wasn't able to fight, like, at all. He did lose to Dominic Cruz when Cruz returned, which was a very emotional and kind of heartwarming return for Cruz. But then Cody goes out there and puts up a masterful performance against Dominic Cruz. And then you have one of the most defining rivalries the division has ever seen in Cody Garbrandt versus TJ Dillashaw. And TJ starched him twice. I know Cody hurt him really bad at the end of the first round of their first fight. Still knocked him out in the second. Knocked him out in the first round, I think, or second round in their second fight. It's hard for me to... It's either Cruz or Dillashaw is the best bantamweight of all time. And I guess Cruz having the victory over him might make that... answer that for a lot of people. But, God, I despite the PEDs, and that's a big factor in this, it's hard to really take anything away from him for his whole career,
Right.
So for him to be given that title shot, I'm not for that. I'm not for getting an immediate title shot. So I'll go ahead and say my answer is going to be Aldo Garbrandt. But I want to say why it's not as easy as it sounds is because whoever wins, if Jan and Aljo actually have their fight, which we're assuming is going to happen.
Yeah, that's true. I also went on a limb on that one. So
regardless of who wins, if it's Jan, if it's Aljo, you're going to have a champion who, while, like, let's say Jan wins, that's a title defense. So it legitimizes him more. And then on the other end, if Aljo wins, he's a fresh champion. But getting a win over TJ Dillashaw, who is a legend of that division, who was the champion before, like, never lost the belt, there's going to be always that question hanging over Jan or Aljo's title reign until they can kind of squash that. And I want that kind of opportunity for them to do so.
Right.
Because Jan and Aljo are both great fighters. I love watching both of them compete for different reasons. I mean, they both have such different styles. That's why I think that fight in of itself is going to be awesome. I don't want the opportunity for TJ right now. I think he needs to go win one and earn his way back.
Mm-hmm.
But for Jan or Aljo to, like, if they were able to beat TJ Dillashaw and beat him convincingly, I think it would do so much for their career and for their title reign. But I'm still going to pick Cody and Aldo because it's ultimately the fight. Stylistically, Cody is going to come with the heavy hands. He's going to come with the speed. He's going to be pressuring. Aldo is a pressure fighter himself. He's got a lot of precision. He's got super powerful kicks. And not to mention that, I mean, the guy does have a very much like, in his later years, he's definitely not as aggressive as he was at one point. But when you have someone like Cody Garbrandt trying to back you down, I think you could see the best of Aldo come out in those moments where I think you could just see a crazy back and forth fight where both guys get dropped because neither guy's chin is really all that great at this point.
Right.
But they're still very good fighters, even champion level fighters at this point.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of intrigue in that matchup, and you could almost see it being a number one contender fight. I mean, I know we've got Frankie Edgar and Corey Sandhagen coming up, but, say Cody goes out there and just starches Aldo or vice versa, it takes one showcase performance to, leapfrog you over other deserving contenders. So it really could be a number one contender fight. You really just never know these days.
Yeah.
Especially with the name power of Cody and Aldo both.
Exactly. And I'll leave it there because I know I've talked about this fight a lot. I just think it's the fight to make it bantamweight. That's not a title fight.
Love it.
So my next one is actually featherweight.
Mine as well. This should be fun.
So I decided to do one that's a little fun here because these are two rumored matchups, but I flipped one of the opponents so that it's two matchups that we haven't heard a lot about, but are very realistic as far as where they're at in the rankings and everything. So I'll explain a little bit more later, but my two matchups, Dominic, are Max Holloway versus Yair Rodriguez.
Ooh-wee.
Or the Korean Zombie versus Zabit Magomedsharipov.
Zabit versus TKZ all day, my friend. That fight to me is the fight to make right now in the featherweight division. Zabit, of course, been waiting on that Yair fight. Yair's now suspended through March. We don't even know if he's going to be on the roster come March with all the stuff that goes on between him and the UFC these days. But Korean Zombie, coming off the loss to Ortega. Before that was on a tear. This guy's never in a boring fight. Zabit is always putting on great performances, pulling, magic out of a hat. And I think the Zombie really would be a very tough test for him, especially because we've seen Zabit tire out as the fight goes on. And the Zombie, well, he's called the Zombie. This man never gets tired, even in the fight against Ortega, which he was losing. Never gave up, never quit, was still going for the win, was still going for the big shot. I think this fight has a lot of implications. I mean, even though Zombie just lost to Ortega, he could come out, starch Zabit, and all of a sudden get a title shot, depending on who the champ is. For Zabit, he's a guy that's already deserving of a title, and if he were to get another win here against a guy like Korean Zombie, it's just solidified at that point. So that 1,000,000% is the pick for me. I will say Max versus Yair is super intriguing. Definitely a fight I hadn't really thought of much. So that's fun that you brought that up. Max is just such an amazing striker. So good all around. We just don't see him on the ground very much. For Yair, we've really never even seen the guy on the ground outside of getting dominated by Frankie Edgar. But outside of that, he's damn near looked flawless. Of course, that fight he had with Korean Zombie, one of the best fights ever. One of the biggest come-from-behind knockouts ever. So that fight has fireworks written all over it. Max and Yair is an all-out just bloodbath war. I think the same, truthfully, for Zabit and Korean Zombie. I do feel that fight could be a little more slower paced because I just think Zabit would control the fight a little more. But that's still not taking anything away from it because I'm picking Zabit TKZ all day. But I do like that you brought up Max and Yair. I actually, if you even want to touch on kind of what made you mention that, I'm interested.
Well, truthfully, a lot of it was because I think the matchups that we've talked about in the past, it's really Yair has basically been strictly placed with Zabit, right? So you have these other three guys we've kind of talked about a lot. So you got Max versus Zabit, you got Max versus TKZ, and then you got Korean Zombie versus Zabit. And I feel like Yair's been kind of left out of that group.
Yeah.
And really, I could have done it anyway. I could have done Max versus Korean Zombie and then Zabit versus Yair as the two options. But there's something about the Yair Max style matchup that just could lead to a really fun fight. You know, Yair brings a very, I don't want to say wild, but he's got a very electric style, put it that way. He's very fluid in his striking. He's very fast. He's got just some crazy combinations and kicks that he'll throw. Max is much more precision. He's much more, when I say standard, I mean the most excellent form of standard, but you don't necessarily see Max throwing wheel kicks and doing a lot of jumping, flying knees and stuff like that.
Right, and if he does, it's just so calculated and so precise. Max is truly just one of the best strikers there is.
So I just think that it leads to a very fun matchup because Yair does bring that. And can Max it's kind of about who can control the pace of that fight. If Yair is able to lure Max into that kind of just a wild brawl or wild sprawl, not that Max hasn't shown, Ricardo Lama's fight, he's shown that he will stand and bang, but for the most part, especially in this later part of his career, these last few performances, he's been much more level-headed, I guess, or patient.
Mm-hmm.
And Yair is still just this young, wild guy. That's kind of the mindset I have about Yair Rodriguez. Is he's still very
flashy,
young and wild, and
yeah.
He works to his advantage though. He shows just some amazing combinations and arsenal of weapons, and it would just be like, could he land that kind of shot on Max Holloway, like something you never thought you would see?
Right.
Or would Max be able to kind of weather an early storm and drag Yair into some deep waters and make him fight his fight? And I think that would be very fun. But also, the Korean Zombie Zabit fight is probably the one I'm going to pick. I don't like to put too much on, the last fight, but this Korean Zombie Zabit probably would have been the obvious pick. But Korean Zombie versus Brian Ortega, Ortega did have just a truly amazing performance. And yet, it almost hurt my hype for Korean Zombie against someone like Zabit. Because I'm like, man, I know how good Korean Zombie still is. He's one of my favorite fighters. But a part of me also wonders, okay, did the Korean Zombie's time kind of come and go? Did it kind of pass us by? Can he really compete with someone like Zabit, who, I know we haven't seen him in Ortega yet, but Zabit has just some crazy potential. And I just wonder if almost like the Max Yair fight is more unpredictable, more exciting of a fight once it actually goes down, while maybe Zabit Korean Zombie could end up being more like what Ortega Zombie was.
Right. Yeah. I definitely see where you're coming from there.
I hope that's not the case. I still believe in Zombie. I still think that guy is just he's kind of a legend in himself, just for the way he's, I don't know, just his reputation. He's kind of a mystic figure in MMA. And I don't know. I'm probably still gonna pick Korean Zombie Zabit as well, but it's just two matchups that are at different places. The Holloway Yair fight excites me more and more each day. Korean Zombie Zabit, I'm starting to stagger on a little bit, but as of now, I would still say it's above Holloway Yair.
Well, then I'm very intrigued to see what your answer is here, because featherweight fight. I also have Zabit Korean Zombie, but the opponent, the this or that second option, Max Holloway versus Brian Ortega 2, my friend.
Brian Ortega 2.0.
Yeah, Max Holloway versus Brian Ortega 2.0 2. There we go.
You know, I think I am going to go Max Ortega 2.
I would have to agree.
And truthfully, again, if this was before the Ortega Zombie fight, it would have been it would have been Zombie, Zabit, 100%. So that's why I kind of feel bad to put I feel like I'm putting a lot on that fight when maybe I shouldn't be. And maybe it was just Ortega just truly had a masterful performance and looked like he was just a reborn fighter. Looked he had developed in every asset of his game. But I am going to go Ortega Holloway too. You know, I know Ortega's only had the one fight since he got beat down by Max. But yet, so much has happened for both of these guys. Ortega took that long hiatus. We didn't know what we were going to see when he came back. He went into the cage bald. That wasn't a great look. It was like, man, he kind of looks like he had the look of a guy that was returning and was going to get like pretty much starched right away. I don't know. That was the feeling I had.
And he does the exact opposite.
And so then here, on Max's end anyways, you know, he continued after that fight with Ortega was kind of the peak of his run, because his next fight was when he went up to fight Poirier for the interim lightweight belt. Got beat by Poirier. Great fight, awesome fight. Max had his moments for sure, but Poirier won 4 of those 5 rounds, in my opinion. So then he goes back, defends against Frankie Edgar, who, let's be honest, Frankie Edgar got that title shot off of who he was, not who he is.
Right.
Or was at that time, but you get my point. Frankie should probably not have been fighting for a title at that point, but he was given it because of a lot of what he had done previously. So Max won that fight pretty easily. And then you get these Volkanovski fights. I thought Max lost the first one 4-1, but it was still a good fight, not, you know, a domination by any means, very close. And then you get the second fight where I thought Max won 3-2. Judges saw it the other way. Volkanovski retains. So you see these, you know, these guys, a lot has happened to where now it feels like, even though Ortega's only had the one fight since then, it feels like this matchup is just primed to run it back already. Because Ortega showed so much growth in his last fight with Korean Zombie. But is he Max Holloway level? That's the question.
Exactly.
Because Max Holloway has maybe had his speed bumps over the last couple of years, you know, losing the belt, losing that chance to become like a double champ. But he's still Max freaking Holloway, man. And that second fight with Volkanovski proved that he is still just as good as he was when he beat down Ortega and when he was beating Aldo and stuff like that. So there's no question to me that Holloway is still just as good now as he's been at his peak. I think he's still in his prime, or really hasn't even reached his prime if you want to go by the age.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But Ortega showed so much growth in his last fight that it makes me wonder, could this Ortega beat Holloway?
Yeah, that's exactly where I agree with you and why I think this is the fight I would pick here out of these two. As dominant as Max was in that first fight with Ortega, this new version, man, of Ortega, I truthfully have been saying ever since that night, I'm like, this dude can come and wipe out anyone in this top 5 after that performance. I mean, his striking looked world class, and we didn't even get to see his excellent Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and that's what is so dangerous about Brian Ortega right now. Watch out for this man. He's going to be on a mission for that title, and I know he wants to run it back with Max. And I think really we're one fight away for each of them from seeing it again.
Yeah, I guess my last point there is just going to be that even though that would be a rematch, and you got Zabit and Korean Zombie as the other option, which is a fight that excites a lot of us, including both of us. I just think that Holloway Ortega too, man. I think when that fight happens, if it happens, man, I mean, Holloway to me is just as good as he was when he fought Ortega the first time. But Ortega's last fight showed me that he is better than he was when they fought the first time.
So is this better?
I can't sit here and say 100% that Holloway is a better fighter now than he was when he fought Ortega the first time.
Right.
So it kind of means, has Ortega's growth been enough to surpass Max Holloway?
Exactly.
That would be the question. Now we're going to move on to my second to last fight here at lightweight. And we got a common guy in both of these as well.
Same.
Actually, these next two we have a common guy.
This ought to be interesting.
So we have a guy who's involved in a pretty high level fight coming up. A fighter you are a massive fan of, Dominic.
Ooh.
Pressure makes diamonds is what they say.
Ooh.
So we got some Dustin Poirier.
Paid in full, baby.
Now, Dominic, would you rather see Dustin Poirier run it back with Justin Gaethje for a second time? Or would you rather see Dustin Poirier take on Charles Oliveira?
All right. Well, you threw me off, first off, so kudos to you. Wow. This is fascinating because, truthfully, let's say Dustin does go in next month and beat Conor. He's in an interesting spot because as of right now, that's not for a belt. Even if it is for a belt, he's in an even more interesting spot. Because then what do you do next with Dustin? Because clearly, if it's not for a title, he definitely just earned it. And if it is for the title, then he just became the lightweight champion of the world. So who would be next? It's either, does he fight the guy that was just the interim champ and lost to Khabib and Justin Gaethje? So technically Justin still is deserving of a title shot, right? I mean, you would think. Or does he fight the guy in Charles Oliveira, who's on an 8-fight win streak, 7 of which via finish, and the lone decision was pure dominance against Tony Ferguson, one of the best lightweights in UFC history? Oh, boy. Do I have to answer? No, I'm just kidding. I want to answer this. I'm all for Dustin and Charles, as a matter of fact. No, I really love both of those guys, so I would have a very hard time watching it. I can tell you that much. But, we've seen Dustin versus Justin, and I'm not saying it would be the same result. However, I know it would be the same style of fight. We know it would be a brawl, and some guy is going to have the tougher chin that night. We know this. But Dustin versus Charles is interesting because on paper you see it as a striker versus grappler. However, Dustin has very underrated ground game, damn near submitted Khabib. And Charles has very underrated striking.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very, very intriguing. I love the sound of that matchup. Charles Oliveira, by all means, deserves a title. I need this man to be fighting for a title shot. I don't care if he has to wait out 6 months to let the division clear up. But he's on an 8-fight win streak, man. No one else has done what this man has done. And to do what he did to Tony Ferguson is enough. Just when you thought, Justin Gaethje's performance against Tony was amazing, Charles Oliveira went out and did what he did in a completely different way. So, yeah, I'm going to, just barely am I going to take Dustin versus Charles. Because, again, Dustin 2 is incredible. I think it's an absolute war, a fight of the year on paper. But, again, we've already seen that fight, and I think it would be the exact same fight. Maybe the result could vary, but I think we see the same fight. Charles and Dustin, on the other hand, never seen it. 2 totally different fighters, but at the same time, both of their weaknesses are not necessarily weak. When you look at the overall state of the division, their weaknesses are still strong compared to others. So it's very fun matchup, very interesting stylistically. Couldn't tell you right now what I think would happen in that fight, and that's why I'm more intrigued, and I'm going to take Dustin Poirier versus Charles Oliveira. Noah, that was great. That was very good. I'm going to give you a clap on that one.
I will say your breakdown of Oliveira versus Poirier is going to be why I end up choosing it as well. But man, at first I was definitely like, oh, I think Justin is like why not? Why wouldn't you want to see that again, right? It was so good the first time, and these guys are just as good, if not better now than they were then. So why not run it back, you know? But Dustin Poirier and Charles Oliveira are definitely viewed as like, Dustin's very much viewed as a boxer. Charles Oliveira is very much still viewed as a jiu-jitsu guy. But they're probably two of the more well-rounded guys you'll find in the whole division, especially when you consider that they don't seem to get that kind of respect for that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, do I trust Charles Oliveira's stand-up ability more, or do I trust Dustin's ground game more when going against someone who's so specialized in that area? Truthfully, I still think I would probably side with Charles in that matchup if we ever see it. Maybe recency bias is the reason for that, but Dustin Poirier just looked fantastic over the summer against Dan Hooker in a Fight of the Year contender. That was number 3 on our list for the video we did last week. Go check that out. But for Poirier, win or lose this Conor fight, those are the 2 matchups that like intrigue me the most for him, win or lose. Regardless of if there's a title fight involved with this McGregor fight, you know, if Dustin wins or, you know, it's just, there's so much, I don't even want to like assume kind of for either of these fights, you know, what the situation would be. I don't want to assume, well, if Dustin wins, then this fight makes more sense, or if he loses, this fight makes more sense. I'm just looking at it like right now, if for some reason, you know, if he didn't have a fight right now, which fight would I want to see most? And it's him and Charles.
Right.
But if he does lose to Conor, I think him and Justin could very well run it back.
Yeah, and I mean, even still, that fight could be number 1 contender, you know? It's like, it's so crazy, this division right now, and you can't go wrong with either, that's for sure. But if we're really talking what's more intriguing, I think we both agree there. I love that you did both those fights. That's awesome. Anything with Dustin Poirier, you can sign me up to be a spectator for. So. Oh,
I know how much of a fan you are, so I had to throw him in there.
And you know, I think I've got a tough one here for you, Noah.
Okay.
I do have the same fighter in both my matchups. However, it's not the same person that you had. So I've got a matchup here, Mr. Charles Oliveira, who you mentioned, versus Justin Gaethje, who you also mentioned, right. or Noah, because you know this or that, Justin Gaethje versus Michael Chandler. Oh, that's my curveball. I just threw it in at you.
Oh man. Oh my, that's a good one, man. That's you really put a good one in there. So let me talk this through. I don't want to just sit here and be like,
no better way to do it.
Thinking. Okay, so on one end you got Charles Oliveira, Justin Gaethje, correct? That was what you said?
Yes.
And then Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler. So on one end, Charles Oliveira, Justin Gaethje. Right now, that fight does make a lot of sense. Gaethje's last, even though he's coming off a loss, it was to Khabib, who was looking like it's going to retire. And therefore, in a way, Gaethje still kind of is in, you know, he was looked at as the interim champ. You know, I know he lost his interim belt by losing to Khabib, but if Khabib had retired before their fight, Justin would be the undisputed champ right now. So he's still second guy. And if Habib's out of the picture, then he's kind of the uncrowned champion in a way.
Right.
So for Charles, I want to see him get a title fight. And it feels like Justin Gaethje is the closest thing to that right now, unless you're talking like Conor McGregor because of the more eyeballs on the fight, and,
Right.
just how much money you can make off that. But if you're going by just competitive, the art of competition, as I mentioned earlier, it makes most sense. If I want Charles to get a title fight, you put him with Gaethje. But on the other end here, Justin Gaethje is coming off that loss. So therefore, you would like to see him get another win before being reinserted into a title fight. And Michael Chandler, who has been Mr. Bellator, who has spent almost his whole career at Bellator, has yet to make his debut in the UFC. And there's just so much we don't know.
Yes.
And that's always what did I just say? The best fights are made when there's more at stake, when it's not simply both guys have something to gain, they have something to lose. Man, I talked that through, but I still don't know if I have an answer, because I feel like the fight with most at stake, is Gaethje Chandler. But yet, I feel like I'm leaning towards Oliveira Gaethje, because I think stylistically that fight is incredible. Again, this is even a better version almost of what you said with the Poirier matchup.
Right.
Again, Oliveira, very specialized in his jiu-jitsu, but has shown a much more improved stand-up over the years, to the point where I would even go as far as to say that he has a great stand-up.
Yeah.
Gaethje also has great stand-up, but his background is being a Division I
All-American wrestler.
Yes. So, but again, you have a matchup where I think it could be a stand-up war. Truly, I think it could be. And yet it could also be like a fight where Oliveira's willing to pull guard and just throwing up submissions, and Gaethje trying to weather the storm of that and maintain that top position. It could be really exciting no matter where the fight goes.
Well, and I want to pose a question there then off of the Oliveira and Gaethje matchup.
Mhm.
Does the fact that even though we know Gaethje's wrestling background is so strong, and I know Habib is still a next level grappler when compared to Oliveira, but does that at least concern you a little, that it did look relatively easy to get Justin down if you're, looking at this fight, what could be the cons and picking Chandler and Gaethje over this one? Does Oliveira maybe getting the takedowns easier in your head based off of Justin's last performance? Or is that just, that's Habib, so let's not compare?
I will say that I look at that as being more Habib. I actually think that, I don't want to say what worries me more, but the fact that Habib was able to get multiple submissions off his back against Gaethje, and I shouldn't say just off his back, but he got that arm bar in at one point, was
Right.
able to turn it into the was it triangle choke?
Yes.
I don't.
Yep.
Oliveira is going to be doing that all day off his back.
Oh, yeah. And we saw how
So-
nasty his armbar was.
Yeah, so that would be one thing. But I have to think that Gaethje knows, like, in his head, he has to know he has to work on that after losing that way. And if you're going up against Oliveira, you got to be ready for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you could lead to Gaethje almost, I don't want to say playing it safe, because that almost doesn't sound exciting, but playing it smarter on the ground, not just assuming that his background or skill level that he already has is going to be enough to carry him through, but recognizing that he's going up against a very dangerous submission specialist. I'm really talking about this fight a lot, but that Gaethje Chandler fight, just how, the biggest thing there is, if Michael Chandler wins that fight, I mean, he's probably getting a title shot,
Yeah,
right?
he's making a debut in the UFC, beating Justin Gaethje and getting a title shot. 1,000,000% that would be
And
what
maybe,
would happen.
and maybe this is the same if he loses to Oliveira, but if Gaethje loses to Chandler, what's next for him? You know?
Right.
Wow, if Gaethje beats Chandler, what's next for Michael Chandler? He just lost his debut.
Yeah.
Man. I think I'm going to go Oliveira Gaethje.
I respect it.
I think it's, truthfully, I feel like Michael Chandler should maybe be fighting someone a little bit,
Like a Dan Hooker.
Well, yeah, Dan Hooker. Because I don't want to say, because Dan Hooker is literally, what, fifth, sixth right now?
Sixth now, yeah, but.
Or even him, I think I said Chandler versus Paul Felder.
Yeah.
A good entryway.
You don't think necessarily he should just get thrown into these top three guys.
I know he fought some very high-level guys at Bellator, guys who could very much potentially be champion of the UFC. But this is the UFC's lightweight division, the most stacked division in all mixed martial arts. And I worry about the idea of throwing him too deep right away.
To where you almost can't reel him back, Yeah,
because if he loses, let's say Gaethje, if he fought Gaethje and gets knocked out in a couple minutes, a lot of the hype is probably lost for his next fight.
Right.
It's kind of like Askren when he got knocked out by Masvidal. And really, that could have happened even sooner if Lawler had been able to finish
it damn near happened in his debut.
Yeah, so and I know Askren, he got choked out by Maia, but if you even look at that fight going in, Askren versus Maia, I know it headlined, but that wasn't very much talked about as a very big fight. It was like the hype was gone,
Right.
So I worry that could be the case for putting Chandler against someone like Gaethje right away.
Yeah, it's tough. We've been talking about Chandler Gaethje for so long at this point. I think that fight does have more intrigue in terms of a stand-up war because we've seen that Chandler is also not afraid to stand and bang. He's got his fair share of knockout victories over there in Bellator, has his fair share of a couple, TKO knockout losses, and the same goes for Justin, obviously. However, Chandler's still an elite-level wrestler, but I think his wrestling goes a lot better with Justin's, so it could essentially maybe neutralize each other, I guess. So I think that fight would actually be very heavily standing, at least in my head, where Oliveira Gaethje, again, it's just the Oliveira, what are you going to get with this guy? And it's like I was saying with him and Dustin, what's going to happen here? Justin's so good on the feet. Oliveira is very good on the feet, just is underrated. Oliveira's incredible on the ground. Justin, Division I All-American background in wrestling. However, we did see him get taken advantage of the wrestling by Khabib, but like you said, Khabib is just so next level. It's like, do you really judge that if he were to fight Oliveira here? So, it's tough for me as well. I think I will side with you, but again, just very slightly. And more so because of how good Oliveira looked against Ferguson, man. It's just like, this guy deserves these top-level guys. He deserves these title fights. And, I'd love to see Chandler make his debut against a guy like Justin. But to me, similar to you, Chandler Hooker, Chandler RDA, Chandler Felder is a little more comforting in welcoming him to the UFC. And then, say he were to win, gets launched right into this killer's row of this top 5 in the lightweight division. So,
right. Okay, so now we're on to our last fights here that we have for this or that. And I'm going out with a bang here, Dom.
I'm not prepared, I don't think.
I'm not sure how easy this is going to be for you. I'm not even sure where your head is at with these two fights. But we do have a common fighter in here.
Okay.
But we have 2 different weight classes. So, it's everybody's favorite fighter of all time. The lovely Jon Bones Jones is in both of these. So first up, I got Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic,
Oh.
or John Jones versus Israel Adesanya.
You know, it was. You said it, and I had it in my head, so I'm just gonna go with it. Jones and Izzy, man. It has to be. It has to be that fight, but it has to be this coming year. That's, I think, where the problem is.
Mm-hmm.
Because of all the hype, these two just can't stand each other. The Twitter beef was just outrageous for, it seemed like, weeks. There's just so much to capitalize on here if you're the UFC. I just think you'd be silly not to try and make this fight, especially now that we're more than likely seeing Izzy go up and fight for that light heavyweight belt. If he were to beat Jan Blachowicz and become light heavyweight champ, you gotta call up John Jones and say, hey, hold on the, buffing up, 240, 245 pounds, chill on the creatine, the protein powder. Let's get you back down to 205 one last time. You never lost your belt. So what way to prove you're the GOAT than to go back and win it for shits and giggles against the guy you can't stand?
Mm-hmm.
That fight just has to happen. Israel Adesanya undefeated. John Jones essentially undefeated. The one loss on his record is by disqualification, which is questionable even to this day.
Now hold on, can I insert myself in here real quick?
Of course.
I just want to give some a little callback here to a quote you have said on this podcast when it came to Jones versus Stipe. You said that fight could literally be who's the GOAT.
Right. That's why, like, damn. This guy Izzy just has to come and ruin all the plans. It's crazy, man, because really both of these fights to a certain extent, I don't think Izzy's quite on the GOAT status yet, but he's surely approaching it if he stays undefeated like he is right now. If he gets this second belt, it's like, if Izzy comes up and wins this light heavyweight belt, he's a 2-weight world champion. Is this fight more so for the GOAT than if it was Jones versus Stipe? I know Stipe is the greatest heavyweight of all time, the 2-time champ, most title defenses, but he never got 2 belts. Now, I know he's not small enough to make light heavyweight, so it's not all his fault, but it's just there's so many intangibles. You can't go wrong with either one of these fights. Both fights, huge implications. One, I think, does a lot better on the pay-per-view side of things, and that would be Jones-Izzy. The trash talk, the hatred, the styles, I don't know how this fight would go. Both these guys are so great standing, but John is such a good wrestler. We don't see him utilize it too much, but when he does, he's just so incredible. Izzy, I don't even know if the guy's been taken down, and if he has, he gets right back up. His takedown defense is next level. His striking is just world class, unbelievable. I truly just don't know where that fight goes. And, on the other end, Jones and Stipe, John Jones goes up, wins the heavyweight belt. He's truly the GOAT. It's not even up for debate anymore. If Stipe can stop Jones and look good doing it, to add on to that, it's like, yeah, Stipe's definitely the greatest heavyweight of all time, but maybe we're talking greatest of all time at this point. I mean, no one has been able to say that they've beaten John Jones outside of Matt Hamill, which, again, he was getting destroyed that entire fight, so,
Matt Hamill is truly the GOAT.
Yes, this is true. So Matt Hamill, Stipe Miocic, mark me down 2021. No, I'm just kidding. Both these fights are incredible, man. This is tough. And they're both so great for so many different reasons. I think Stipe and John would be it would have such a Stipe DC vibe where there's so much tension and they just want to beat each other so bad, but there's still so much mutual respect. So there's something beautiful about that. But then you've got Jones versus Izzy. The shit talking leading up to that fight would be unfathomable. I couldn't even imagine. You thought DC and John Jones was bad? This might be up there, if not worse. And just the styles there is what's so intriguing to me. Can Izzy knock out John Jones? Can John Jones knock out Izzy? Is John Jones going to submit Izzy? Izzy just got his purple belt. Is he going to submit John Jones? I don't know what's going to happen. And if I have to go with that one, gut feeling right now. You could ask me it tomorrow, and my opinion could change. But right now, when you said it, that's the option that went into my head, so I had to let that out here on the podcast. But you truly just went big there for your last one.
Yeah, I'll throw my 2 cents in here before we get to yours. Basically, yeah, I think I'm going to agree with Jones Izzy. Um, I think that's a huge fight for legacy. Or, if John Jones goes up and beats Stipe Miocic, Stipe is still the greatest heavyweight of all time, in my opinion. I know Jones would have beat him, but and while I think that, could you imagine, Dom? Stipe is my favorite fighter of all time. I don't know if he's yours or not, but he's right around that top.
For sure, yes.
Could you imagine remember how we felt when Stipe beat DC in that rematch?
Oh, just like we were on top of the world.
So could you imagine if Stipe beat John Jones?
Yeah. No, I can't actually. We would
I
need
can't either
911 on
because
standby.
I truthfully don't think it'll happen.
Yeah, we've
and
had this discussion. That's true.
and that is why that's the biggest reason why I'm picking Jones Izzy. No, not really,
Well,
but
okay, so I will ask,
okay.
does Jones Izzy throw up more question marks and intangibles and like who will win more than Stipe Jones? Is that what you're getting at?
I think there's more at stake. And that's going back to kind of my whole thing I've been saying repeatedly on this episode is that I think when you have two guys, Jones, who's really, sure, he is still one of the best of all time, no matter what way you cut it. But yeah, he still like has something to prove due to all of these PED issues in his career, and even his last
The
couple
last two
fights where
fights, yeah.
we thought he lost. So there's still much left. There's still a lot he needs. Still has to do if he wants to be the clear cut GOAT. And for Israel Adesanya, who has no blemishes, he doesn't have PED issues, at least not that we know of. The saggy tit notwithstanding. But it hasn't been proven anyways, and I'm not going to accuse him of such. But he has such an he's undefeated. He's truly looked unstoppable. He's looked incredible. But he hasn't reached, the GOAT level status yet because, yeah, his biggest win was Robert Whitaker and then Paulo Costa. Yoel Romero fight was just a wet sack of dog shit.
You once called it a shit sandwich.
It was. It's a shit sandwich. And so take that fight out of there. You got Paulo Costa, Robert Whitaker. After that, and don't get me wrong, those super impressive performances, but he still has a lot of work to do to get to that GOAT level status. Now, if he goes up and beats Jan Blachowicz for the belt, that does something, does quite a bit. But I don't think I'm talking GOAT level yet. But if he beats John Jones, especially if we're talking within the next year.
Yeah, I mean, he would still have so much time left on his career.
Yeah.
That's what is even crazier.
So I think that's why I picked that, because if Izzy loses to John, then can he ever legacy wise ever reach that height again? I don't know. And if Jones loses to Izzy, I mean, for us, that'll be something we'll have to talk about or talk through if that time comes. If he loses to Izzy, are we going to say, well, that's 3 in a row we thought he lost?
Right.
Does that affect where we place him? Do we start? I mean, really, at that point, you're starting to look at like an Anderson Silva in the late career he had level of losing streak.
It's a good question. It's a good question.
So it's there's just a lot at stake, I feel there, and that's why when you're talking legacy, I think Jones and Stipe is an amazing fight, and the idea of Stipe beating Jones, I think there's a lot. There's a lot that could, Stipe wins. There's a lot he could gain. I don't think him losing to John Jones affects him.
Yeah, I mean, I think
I don't
Stipe
think
would still be
he's
the
still
greatest
like. I don't
heavyweight
think
ever.
if Jones beats Stipe, that's his first fight at heavyweight. He's not the heavyweight GOAT.
Right.
And Stipe is at the tail end of his career, you would assume.
Right.
So who knows? He may only have 1 or 2 fights left in him before he wants to hang him up.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I think his legacy is pretty much written for Stipe, unless
Yeah, I
he
mean,
were to
anything
beat-
more for Stipe truly would be icing on the cake, unless, of course, he were to beat John Jones. That's like that
I
big
think
hoorah
for
moment.
Stipe, I think he can only move forward legacy wise. I don't think he can move backward at this point.
Right, right.
While Izzy and John Jones can go any direction.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
But I'll let you take over now.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely went big on your last one. Mine's, kind of back down to earth. My big home run hit was the lightweight fight. This
Right.
was your home run hit, so I'm going to pull it back. I hate to go from that to this, but I still think I just do have 2 fun fights here. We're going to be in the middleweight division.
Mhm.
First being Mr. Bobby Knuckles 2.0, may I add, versus Paulo Costa for what could potentially be a vacant title at this point. I don't really know what's going on with the middleweight division, or an interim title at least. Or Darren Till versus Marvin Vettori, Noah. Again, you hit it out of the ballpark on the last one, but a couple fun ones here just to kind of think about in terms of the future of the middleweight division and what we see next year.
Well, these are fun because we haven't really had a chance to talk too much about either of these matchups, and they're both looking like they could happen.
Right.
So I think Till Vettori is very fun. I love that Marvin Vettori is finally in that upper echelon, and we can start kind of matchmaking him in these discussions,
And just getting that respect he deserves.
Yeah, and Darren Till is such a puzzle of a striker that I think it tests Vettori even more so. Vettori is a bit of an emotional fighter. He definitely fights with that emotion, but that can sometimes be a positive and a negative. So I think Darren Till, who no matter how much shit he talks before a fight, how crazy he is in his personal life or on Twitter, he's very calm in the octagon, very composed. And I think that could be very fun because it could show a lot about Vettori. Can he do what Robert Whittaker did against Darren Till? Robert Whittaker could be he's kind of the opposite. Robert Whittaker is a very calm, collected outside the cage fighter, but in the octagon, he's very emotional fighter. He's very I don't know how to describe it. Like he doesn't show a lot of emotion on his face, but he'll go to war. His style leads to where you have to have a certain level of aggression and anger built up to even fight the way he was fighting against Yoel Romero and stuff like that. But
Right.
we saw Whittaker able to be the calm, the level-headed, the patient striker against Darren Till. So can Vettori do that? Can he work his game to where he can compete with Darren Till? It's a very intriguing fight. But Whittaker Costa is going to be my pick here. I mean, I'm talking, look, I know Costa's stock is at an all-time low right now. I get it. He didn't look great against Izzy. But come on, man. Neither did, and I know Whittaker has fought since then to boost his stock back up. But I mean, outside of Izzy, these are the 2 best middleweights in my opinion right now. And I think that matchup would be fucking fireworks because I don't think that fight goes to a decision. I really don't. I think that, again, you have this new Robert Whittaker who's very patient. He's very collected. He doesn't quite rush in for the finish. If he hurts somebody, he will take his time. And for Costa, he is still the bull that he was before. But how much is that Izzy loss going to weigh on him?
Yeah.
Because that is a disheartening loss if I've ever seen one.
Yeah, I mean, does he have a huge chip on his shoulder, or did that really affect him mentally and what could be next for him?
Will he did he get his soul taken?
Right.
Like how we've seen guys like Ngannou go through when he lost to Stipe. there's a lot of questions there, but I think on paper that matchup should be awesome. And I wouldn't count Costa out of it just if you go off of where him and Whitaker stock is right now. I think that's definitely an acceptable title fight. I get it. Is he dominating Costa? You might want Costa to win one again before you put him back in another title fight. But he lost to the champion who's been so dominant. Kind of like what I said with Justin Gaethje. If Izzy moves up in weight, then I mean Costa and Whitaker are the two guys that both got dominated by him. So why not let them decide who the next middleweight champion is?
Right.
It makes sense. I think it's an awesome fight. I think not enough people are talking about that matchup in a positive light because I think that fight would be. I would even go as far as say I think it could be a fight of the year contender if it goes long enough.
Yeah, I mean, it would be incredible to see, especially like you said, the new version of Robert Whitaker just seems to be so much more calm and composed, but can still just strike at any given moment. The power's still there. For Costa, up until Israel Adesanya, no blemishes on that perfect record that he once had. And really the only fight that was close was him and Yoel, and that was just an all-out war. On the other hand, Till Vettori is very fun for differing reasons. Till, of course, has that striking advantage. I think far and away, actually, in that fight. However, the X factor here, I think, would be Vettori's grappling and submissions. And I think that could really play a factor. I'm not saying Vettori's bad on the feet, but Till's striking is just so crisp and so technical. It's a very interesting fight, both of these. And I think both really we could see up next. We really could see both of these fights in 2021, potentially around the same time frame, and play out to where the winners fight the winners, essentially. I mean, if Izzy were to stay at light heavyweight once he goes up, Whitaker Costa for the, vacant title or an interim belt. Then you got Vettori Till. If Vettori were to come in and dominate Darren Till or win after what he did against Hermanson, dude, that's title shot for Vettori next. And for Till, we've been wanting to see Darren Till fight for a title again. He went up in a weight class where he should be. This dude is massive. Had the shaky start with Gastelum, but got what he had to do to get the win. Then has that great fight with Robert Whitaker, very close, had his moments, even dropped Robert Whitaker in the fight. So Till is always going to be there because of how high level his striking is. Has shown relatively good takedown defense outside of when, he gets hurt in a fight, so on and so forth. So both these matchups so good for differing reasons. I am going to side with you. I think Whitaker Costa just is fun, especially if you can get a title around it. That obviously makes any fight more interesting. We have a stand-up war here. And again, I think, as I pointed to earlier, we see Whitaker Costa, we kind of know what's going to happen. It's going to be a stand-up fight. Whether how high action or low action it is, the fight would only tell us. For Till Vettori, we know what Till would want to do, but for Vettori, would he try and stand? Would he try and get the fight to the ground? If he gets the fight to the ground, can Till get up? So that one has more question marks and definitely is very close, but I will side with you, Whitaker Costa. Excited for what is next for middleweight in 2021 because of the decisions that Israel Adesanya makes. So
awesome. Well, that pretty much wraps up this episode of This or That. And let us know what your thoughts are on this concept and how we kind of ran things here. If there's anything you think we should improve about it or change about it for the future, that would be great. But yeah, I'm very happy with how this turned out. I thought it went well.
I thoroughly enjoyed that very much. That was a blast. Got more fun as the recording went on. I think that was great.
Yeah, and before we sign off here, I'm just going to touch on our upcoming episodes. So again, we're in the middle of kind of these Wednesday episodes where we're doing one a week until we get fights back. So next week will be the first episode of 2021.
Yes.
A big moment.
Ringing in the new year.
Yeah, it's going to be dedicated completely to the news. I think that's safe to say at this point because we have had a shit ton of news come out.
Yeah, we got to get a Google Doc created.
Yeah, we got to try to make sure we don't miss anything. And Obviously, there's going to be a lot, hopefully, that comes out between now and next Tuesday or so when we record it. So that's going to be coming to you guys on January 6th. That's next Wednesday. And then the week after that, January 13th,
Woo!
classic pay-per-view review, UFC 1, where it all started. And I'm very excited to do both of those before we get right back in to that Friday, January 15th, with the breakdown of Holloway Cater.
Oh man, I'm telling you, once we get past January 6th, it's a roller coaster after that. So enjoy this little lull in action. Why we've got it to our great listeners, to me and Noah even, because come middle of January, woo, 2021 is going to be a fun one.
Well said. But Dominic, tell the good people where they can find you on social media.
Find me on Twitter and Instagram at dsali14, and you can find the podcast also on Twitter and Instagram at BAJ_MMA podcast.
And as for me, if you go to my bio on Twitter or Instagram at ntbaker_, you'll be taken to our link tree, which gives you the links to all the platforms you can find our podcast on, along with the social media links. So the Twitter, the Instagram, along with the YouTube channel, the Anchor page, Spotify, Google, Apple Podcast. It's all on there. And there's a link if you want to become a supporter of the podcast. That just provides with a few dollars a month, and all that money goes back into improving the quality of the podcast, whether it be audio equipment or down the line doing a video podcast. So again, you can find all that if you go to my bio on Twitter or Instagram at ntbaker_. But with that, we're out, and we're going to see y'all on Wednesday.